is. If it's NCAA basketball, it's right here.
The college basketball season continues only on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 6 p.m. We know sports.
Oh, baby, a right hand jam.
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
Power Hour edition of Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN FM. And as always, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank Seattle City. Live in the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Sixers back in the news. Doug Pederson back in the news. Going to Jacksonville. Is James Harden coming to Philadelphia? We will get into all of that and more coming up. Kevin McCormick, Sixers beat writer, will join us coming up at 1:20 p.m. to get more into what is going on in the NBA. As always, you can join the conversation by DMing the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, or you could text in at 609-403-0973. I want to open the show getting to the latest NBA news because it seems like the swirling of the winds are starting to pick up when it comes to this Ben Simmons stuff. And it's less about Ben Simmons and more that it's about, when you really get into it, it's about James Harden. You know, if you go by the latest reports from The Athletic, it's becoming more and more clear that James Harden is just, he's not happy. And I don't know what this is about. I don't know what exactly is going on with Harden. I kind of got the feeling that, you know, Harden thought, and again, I'm only going by what all of us have read, okay? All of us have seen and read. I'm getting the sense that Harden went to Brooklyn under false pretenses. I'm getting the sense that Harden thought he was going to Brooklyn to a certain situation, and he's not getting that situation anymore, okay? I don't know what has changed since he was traded, except for the fact of, you know, guys getting injured and Kyrie vaccination status, and apparently somebody somewhere misled him. So whatever the situation is, it just seems like Harden is tired, man. And again, I don't know the reason why. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know James Harden that well. You know, I don't know the guy personally or anything, but it genuinely seems like Harden is at a point where he doesn't want to be the guy anymore. And I don't blame him. You know, when you think about everything he did in Houston, you realize that Harden might just be tired, man. Harden, he just might have had enough. You know what I mean? And going to Brooklyn, he was supposed to be part of a three-headed monster. And instead, he's having to carry the team. So for him, he probably just wants to go anywhere that's different. And like I said, I don't blame him one bit. And so this situation with Ben Simmons and the Sixers is ideal for the Nets because the Nets are so poor defensively overall, okay? They don't have a lot of the things they need to win a championship. If you were to ask me right now how I would rank the teams in the Eastern Conference of viability to win a championship, Brooklyn's not in the top three. I think Milwaukee has a strong chance of defending their Eastern Conference title. I think that the Miami Heat are vastly improved over what they were last year. Adding Kyle Lowry, adding PJ Tucker, adding the depth pieces they did. I think the Bulls are dangerous. I think the Bulls are more than just one of the highest scoring teams in the league. I think the Bulls are a team that can really run teams ragged. I think between DeRozan and Levine and all those guys, I think they have a chance to really upset the apple cart. So I would take those three teams right now, head over to the Brooklyn Nets. The Kyrie situation, it is what it is. He only plays half the games. It's partially his fault. It's partially not his fault. That's a conversation for another day. But the Harden thing is fascinating because if Harden is not getting what he wants out of a situation and he's strongly considering a world where he doesn't have to do a situation anymore, it makes sense. Now, the question is, are the Nets and the Sixers going to play ball enough to make this happen? That's really the key to all this. We can talk about trade scenarios and who will get traded for who and what could happen. But the biggest thing, if you go to 973ESPN.com, or if you yourself have read all the reports out there, you are aware that according to multiple sources out there, the Sixers have been in talks with Atlanta, with Minnesota for Ben Simmons for a couple months now. And one of the things they point out is the players who are being offered to the Sixers are just not in line with what the Sixers want. But they might be in line with what Brooklyn wants. See, this is where I think we're forgetting something. I don't think this has to be, and I've said this numerous times here on 97.3 ESPN, I don't think it has to be a one-for-one deal. I think this very well could be a 3-4 team kind of deal. And I think because of that, you have a situation where you don't have to figure out just one aspect of this deal. I think there's a way this can be a win-win for everyone involved. And that win-win comes with both Minnesota and Atlanta getting involved in this deal. I think Minnesota knows that they don't want to give up on Anthony Edwards, but they got to improve their roster. I think Minnesota is in a situation where they know that they need to do something. Because as currently constructed, especially in the Western Conference, they just don't have enough. It is what it is. So if you are Minnesota and Atlanta, you don't want to be left out in the cold. You don't want to be the team left without a trade partner. So why not get involved and in with this Harden deal? When James Harden was traded from Houston to Brooklyn, it involved Houston. It involved the Nets. It involved the Cavs. It involved the Pacers. And it involved the Heat. That's a 5-team deal. 5 different teams getting something out of the deal. And you can still argue Houston was the team that lost in the deal because they walked away with pretty much next to nothing from that deal. Now, the Nets have an opportunity to recoup some of their assets they traded away for Harden. The Sixers, I don't think, are against trading first-round picks. I don't think the Sixers are against trading, let's say, Danny Green and, whoever else. But I think this might be a lot of moving parts to get this deal done. I mentioned earlier in the locker room with Billy Schwein in either 10 or 11 o'clock hour that, the Andre Iguodala deal a decade ago that landed Andrew Bynum in Philadelphia, I mean, that involved Denver, it involved the Lakers, it involved the Magic, it involved the Sixers. There were so many teams that were involved in that deal, so many moving parts. That you have to think, why can't this be the same thing? I think there's a way that Philadelphia is able to rope Atlanta and or Minnesota into this deal with the Nets in order for everyone to get something they want. There's a way that Ben Simmons ends up in, let's say, Atlanta or Minnesota, and Brooklyn still gets assets of value they want. I think Brooklyn can walk away from this deadline potentially with both John Collins and Malik Beasley. But the right other players have to be moved. And I think that's where the Sixers, they don't have to give up Tyrese Maxey. They don't have to give up Matisse Thybulle. They don't have to give up some of these guys if they get some of these other teams involved and they get enough moving pieces going around. But Ben Simmons and Harden are the key to all this. And if we're sure that Harden doesn't want to return to Brooklyn next year, then the Nets are better off trading him now than the offseason. Because it's going to be a lot easier to make the deal right now than in July and August when there's a lot of uncertainty in the NBA. Josh Hennig on Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. You can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Sea City. You also can text in at 609-403-0973. We will talk more Sixers and NBA coming up with Kevin McCormick, Sixers beat writer, in about 8 minutes from now. Now, on top of everything we just said there, obviously the NFL is popping off. And Roger Goodell released a memo to other teams around the league. And it seems like the NFL is already starting to backtrack on their previous statements. Now, I'm not going to read you the whole press release and bore you to death. But as I read it earlier today, it looks like the NFL is basically saying, we have a problem. We don't know exactly what the problem is, but we have a problem. So the league is already saying, look, between the Brian Flores lawsuit and the hiring practices of these individual teams, we are in a bad situation. Now, they didn't overtly say what the problem is, but, they said stuff like, we want to give everyone opportunity to have jobs. We don't want to have any racist environments. But it seems like the statement from Goodell is all encompassing of the Flores lawsuit, the hiring situation in the league, the Daniel Snyder situation down in Washington. It seems like that the NFL realizes that now that they are less than a week from the commissioner talking to the media, they need to start getting ahead of this stuff. Now, I'm not promising you that something is going to come out of this or something specifically is going to change or get better. But for the league to put out that memo today is a serious tell that you have a situation where the league understands that their owners, the 32 teams, are not operating in the best interest of the Shield. See, Roger Goodell's job is to protect the NFL, the image of the league, the money-making viability of all of these franchises. And I got to tell you, and I've told you guys this for 2 weeks now, I've been very consistent on this. You cannot go through a head coaching cycle where Nathaniel Hackett, Matt Eberflus, and Kevin O'Connell all get hired ahead of more qualified people and somebody not be suspicious. People can talk all they want about race and the Rudy rule and minority hiring all they want. But it's pretty obvious that the Vikings, the Bears, and the Broncos were more interested in hiring young, fresh faces than they were hiring the most qualified people. Now, the fact that among those more qualified people includes Jim Caldwell and Brian Flores, yes, that is a bad optics thing for the league. But it's also a bad optics thing when Eric Bieniemy keeps getting interviews and people won't hire him. And we know why they're not hiring some of these guys. It's not racial. It's because these owners are more interested in PowerPoint presentations than winning football games. These owners are not football men by design. You know, Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie, or Dolphins owner Stephen Ross, or Falcons owner Arthur Blank. These men are not football lifers. In fact, almost none of the owners have played football any higher than maybe Pee Wee or JV. They don't get how things work in the real world for the rest of us. They don't get how it works in the hiring process for normal people. The league has to be concerned that they are in violation potentially of EOE laws, equal opportunity employment. You created this Rooney Rule to try to avoid the lawsuits that Brian Flores is bringing. And now, the most qualified coach hired this entire cycle is Doug Pederson. To the franchise that has the only minority owner in the league. Read into that what you will. Josh Hennig here in the Matt Black Kia Studios here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll talk more Sixers in the NBA coming up on the other side. Kevin McCormick, Sixers beat writer for Clutch Points, joins me next here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And we'll get to your messages a little bit later this hour. Text board is open 609-403-0973. And you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City.
NBA Saturday Prime Time on ESPN Radio.
Randall gets it off. Got it! At the buzzer for Randall and the Knicks.
The New York Knicks head west on a 5-game road trip that begins in Los Angeles against the Lakers.
Passes out. Anthony Davis. Triple is good. From straight on, the Lakers coming alive from three-point land.
The Knicks and Lakers. It's the NBA on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 8 p.m.
Tired of sitting in traffic? If you won the $137 million Powerball jackpot, you could take your private jet anywhere. After all, anything can happen in Jersey.
Hola, Carla speaking.
Carla's roofing company always goes above and beyond.
Yeah, we heard about next week's forecast.
She needs a new foreman to weather a storm of projects.
You mean another full crew before Wednesday? Mira, Jose, can you work Wednesday?
Indeed can help her hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Instant Match instantly connects you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Sure, we have 30 seconds to tell you that drivers who switch to Progressive could save big. But then what? Well, there is a nice piece of stock music playing behind me that a talented composer worked really hard on. So let's enjoy it. Wow, almost overshadows the saving big when you switch to Progressive part. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Oh my God!
On Wednesday, February 9th,
The atmosphere is electric.
the two hottest live professional wrestling television shows, AEW Dynamite and AEW Rampage,
Hottest ticket in town.
make their Atlantic City debut live
Unbelievable!
at the legendary wrestling venue Boardwalk Hall.
Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this!
The best in the world, CM Punk,
CM Punk in AEW.
Hangman Page, Bryan Danielson, Adam Cole, Dr. Britt Baker, Cody Rhodes, MJF,
Every MJF moment is the best MJF moment.
Jay,
Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara in the Inner Circle, Orange Cassidy, Darby Allin, the Icon Sting, and all your favorite AEW stars will headline this amazing night of elite professional wrestling action.
It's going to be a wild and crazy, unpredictable night, I can tell you that. Too many combustible elements here.
Don't miss AEW Live. Tickets start at $29 plus fees. Go to AEWTix.com.
This tax filing season could be one for the record books. There are thousands of dollars worth of new tax credits on the table, and Jackson Hewitt will help make sure you get every one you deserve. Tax credits for being a parent, taking care of a parent, taking classes, and so much more. Don't leave thousands on the table. Jackson Hewitt will make sure you get credit for all you do and get your biggest refund guaranteed. Learn more and find your nearest location at jacksonhewitt.com.
Escape the cold and spend Valentine's Day in Cancun. Fly nonstop from Atlantic City International Airport to Cancun and experience the beach by day and party by night. Book your low-cost flight today by visiting spirit.com.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
NBA trade deadline is just days away, and the Sixers may actually be making a move. Honestly, I wouldn't have thought that about a week ago. If you would have asked me last Saturday the chances of Ben Simmons being traded by the deadline, I would have said 5%. Now I'm hanging somewhere between 55 and 65%. Talk more about it now with Kevin McCormick, covers the 76ers for Clutch Points. He joins us right now as the Sixers. They lost a wonky game last night. I'm not really concerned about the loss last night, honestly. I mean, let's be realistic. If anybody thought they were going to win that game last night, Kevin, I think they were having maybe too many drinks last night. I mean, the first game of an NBA road trip for every NBA team seems like a loss, doesn't it?
Yeah, not to mention you got to throw in Rimgate. How about that? 40-minute delay for a basket. Stuff like that only happens during Sixers games. I tweeted that out during the delay, and it really is. When you go back, do you remember the Boston game early in the season?
Oh, yeah.
They had to fix the net. Not even the rim.
Not the rim.
Net.
The net.
The net itself 3 times. Like, what is that? Like, Friday night, ESPN, of course, 6 minutes into the game, it's like, all right, we're gonna chill out for 45 minutes because the rim is not gonna function right. But
and listen, I don't want to rip ESPN overtly, but I listen, I don't work directly for ESPN. Okay, so they're not my boss, so I can say this without any repercussions. I think that ESPN suffered greatly last night because when they needed to kill time, they had the 4 worst people possible available to fill airtime. Like here on 97.3 ESPN, we have Tom McGinnis. Tom McGinnis is on the radio telling stories, making fun of people, giving you like a behind the scenes look what's going on there. ESPN TV has Michael Eaves, who's turned into like their utility knife, doing every show possible. Chiney Ogwumike, who she's solid when she's not asked to do more than what like is her role. Richard Jefferson, who seems to be like always trying to make a joke half the time. And Mark Jones, who I think Mark thinks of himself as a professional and he realizes that he's not always working with like polished broadcasters. So he's trying to like work around Richard Jefferson. Like if they would have had like Doris Burke last night, for example, or they would have had, the usual like NBA Today crew, like, Malika Andrews and those people, I think the broadcast would be very different. I wouldn't be surprised if like half the viewers just never turned the game back on last night.
I could agree to that. I'd also feel like people would just get deterred because it's the thing of like, you go back and you check after like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And then after you check again after like 25 minutes and it's like 11 o'clock on a Friday, why are you turning that game back on? If you're the average viewer. But I agree. I mean, I would have loved to see just like 40 minutes of Kendrick Perkins spitting hot takes.
There you go. Kendrick Perkins is another
telling
one.
Telling people believe that. I will say I have grown a fan of Richard Jefferson. I think he's greatly improved like from when he first joined
I think
the
Richard
ESPN
is
now.
Yeah, I think Richard is better on the desk though than he is as a game color guy.
Yeah, I agree. He definitely is a lot better on like their NBA shows, but he has gotten better, I will say, in his time with ESPN.
The guy who I think they don't use enough on the color is actually Vince Carter. I think Vince does a much better job. He does now what Chauncey Billups used to do when he did the games.
Mhm.
Like he kind of like pulls the curtain back, explains things, very insightful. I understand that Jefferson's a little more bombastic entertainment wise, but for me as a consumer of the game, listen, I'm already being entertained by the game on the floor. Give me something more from the broadcaster. That's just my opinion.
I agree. And Vince Carter just has a little more cachet from his playing days.
He's also a better dresser than Richard Jefferson is. No offense to RJ. All right, Kevin, let's get to the real reason why I brought you on today. So in the last 24 hours, this athletic story has really blown open the doors of a lot of things. And as I said before you came on, if you would have asked me last Saturday, I would have been like, Ben Simmons isn't getting traded, before the deadline. But now I'm really feeling like there's a legitimate possibility because this is starting to feel more and more like Daryl Morey is basically putting other teams against the ropes, to use the boxing analogy.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and just the timing of it all. I mean, usually a bombshell story like that doesn't typically drop at 5:00 on a Friday, but I don't know if I'm at the point to where the chances increase. I think it's more telling. I guess in my eyes, the way I take it is seeing that story come out told me that there's a growing reality that either one, the stuff that was coming out a couple weeks ago about the Harden to Philly smoke was real, and Brooklyn is starting to panic. And now they're seeing the writing on the wall. I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago. People are kind of jabbing at Harden, talking about his effort and the way he's looked on the court recently. And I said it's kind of resembling his final days in Houston. So Brooklyn might see the writing on the wall, still feeling that they're a championship team, might be at the point to where maybe on February 9th, they just want to cut ties and bring in whatever they can to possibly better their odds of getting through the regular season and having the right kind of camaraderie and no unnecessarily like black clouds hanging over their head as they get ready for a deep postseason push.
For those of us who read the full Athletic articles, I think one of the bigger parts of this is later in the piece where Shams writes, oh, by the way, the Sixers are still talking to Atlanta and Minnesota. And I think we got to remind people, Kevin, this doesn't have to be a 1-for-1 deal. There's a possibility that Ben Simmons ends up in Minnesota, Harden ends up in Philadelphia, and everyone else goes to Brooklyn. Like, there's a way that this can work and that everybody walks away with a win because we've seen it. The Iguodala trade a decade ago, the Harden trade last year. Once you start getting more teams involved, things get more creative.
Absolutely. And you're talking about a Brooklyn team that could really use depth right now. So when you're looking, while, the Sixers might not be interested in secondary pieces like a Taurean Prince in Minnesota, who's on a rather large contract, like role players of that caliber who can come in, understand what they're meant to do on the court, and could play off of a Kyrie Irving and off of a Kevin Durant. So I agree that could be a very real reality to where Brooklyn decides to cut ties with James Harden in the effort of trying to stock up and be a much deeper team so that they're not forced to play Kevin Durant 50 minutes in a play last year.
And, when I think about Brooklyn, I was saying this before you came on, Kevin, earlier in the show, and I'm not anti-Brooklyn, okay? And the Kyrie situation, let's put that to the side because that's a whole nother conversation. But realistically, when you look at the Eastern Conference and you're asking me, who are the top contenders to win the conference? I can't put Brooklyn in my top 3 anymore. I feel like Milwaukee is the favorite. And I think right now, Chicago and Miami just have more talent from top to bottom. And considering the fact that none of these guys have played together that much, Harden, Durant, and Kyrie have all been injured the last couple of years in Brooklyn. You need more bodies out there than Nick Claxton, for goodness sake. Like, to me, this is an opportunity for Brooklyn to say, look, we tried the 3-headed monster, as they use the term in the Athletic articles. Now let's go with the 2-headed monster plus a better supporting cast situation.
Yeah, not to mention that was always the original idea when those two paired up. And in terms of the hierarchy of the East, I don't know if I'm fully ready to put Chicago ahead of Brooklyn, because at the end of the day, we all know how valuable playoff experience is. And while Chicago has been phenomenal, don't get me wrong, I think they're an extremely fun team. I think they're a good team when fully healthy. I think they get it done on both ends of the floor. DeRozan's been phenomenal. Zach LaVine's still very good in his own right. But we're talking about Kevin Durant. This is a man that's won championships. He's played in a plethora of big playoff games. Kyrie Irving as well in the games that he's able to play on the floor. So I think that experience and just those guys who are big moment type of players, I think that even if Chicago might be a bit of a deeper team, or you could even say their roster as a whole is more talented, that star talent and star players win championships in the NBA. And I think that deciding factor should still keep Brooklyn in that tier 1 of the Eastern Conference.
Okay, so then it would be, so then you still then
I think I'd put Miami ahead of Chicago as well.
Okay.
I think if we're tiering it, I'd say
Milwaukee. Well, my tiering originally was Milwaukee, Miami, Chicago, Brooklyn. That was my original tier. But you're saying knock Chicago down and put Brooklyn in 3.
Yeah, I would say if I had to rank them, I would put Milwaukee as my first, Brooklyn right there, and then Miami, not on that tier 1 level to be a real contender threat, but I think they're going to be a very tough out in the postseason, and I wouldn't be shocked if they made a deep run and were in the mix with those teams come, the Eastern Conference Finals.
I think the thing with Miami, Kevin, is I think they arguably have one of the best defensive units of all the playoff teams. And I think when you get into a playoff series and you put on the court, you have Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, PJ Tucker, you have one of the 2 shooters, whether it's Robinson or Hero. And then the 5th guy is, I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Bam Adebayo.
Adebayo. I wanted to say Udonis Haslem, but no, it's not Haslem. It's Adebayo. You have those 5 guys on the floor. That's a scary 5 to deal with in crunch time. And I don't know if there's many teams not named Milwaukee that can really handle that.
Absolutely. And there's so many different ways that they can, hurt you defensively. They can pretty much switch across the board. Kyle Lowry, though undersized, still a very gritty defender. You always see him making those, drawing a charge late in the game to swing a possession, like stuff like that. Just guys who think through the game, who defend with their brains. Bam Adebayo, extremely talented defender. PJ Tucker, who was a valuable piece for Milwaukee in their championship run. So, yeah, I agree. I think they're going to be a very, very tough team when it comes to 7-game series, when they're able to really get into the chess match that is postseason basketball.
Kevin McCormick from Clutch Points joining us here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at KevinMCC NBA. Sixers back in action tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Now, Kevin, back to the whole Simmons Harden situation. I think the other thing that's interesting about this is, and I said this yesterday, I think part of the strategy here is Morey can go to Brooklyn and say, I can give you a deal now that I can't give you in the summer. Because, for example, Danny Green's got the non-guaranteed contract. So he might be a trade piece in the offseason. We don't know if Atlanta and Minnesota are going to want to make certain deals if we get to the summer, or they make other deals now that void those players from being available in a bigger deal in the summer. Morey's strategy may very well be to Brooklyn, look, I don't care about giving you picks. I don't care about giving you fill-in-the-blank player. But you're not going to get certain these options later on. So now it feels like Morey, who, as Woj put it this week, is not feeling pressure to make a deal, but he's wanting to get the best deal. And maybe this is the way he thinks is the best deal.
I agree. And there's also the business side of things to look at, to where in the summer, if Harden were to opt out of his player option, it would become a sign and trade that would hard cap the Sixers in reality. That would also hurt their chances of upgrading in the margins where needed. So I think it's kind of both sides to, and like you said, there could be deals on the table there now that might not be there in the summer. So while Daryl Morey might not feel pressured, I think the Sixers side of things also has ways to benefit from getting a deal done now as opposed to the summer too.
Do you think there's also potentially pressure in the Nets organization to do something? Because they've invested a lot of resources into this run, and so far it's kind of been empty. And I know everyone points to, if Kevin Durant's foot wasn't so big, they conveniently forget that the Nets were so injured last year. I mean, Kyrie was out for the rest of that series. Harden was running around on one leg, for goodness sake, and it was just Durant and a bunch of guys half the time. So, people act like, the Nets, they were this close. They were this close, man, but they really weren't. They would have won that game. They're going against an Atlanta team that is younger, healthier, and fresher than they are.
Yeah, I agree. And there definitely could be that pressure because when you bring in a Kevin Durant, when you bring in a Kyrie Irving initially, they were instantly thrown at the top of championship contenders, even more so when they trade for James Harden. When that deal first went down, people were envisioning them being one of the best trios in the history of the sport. And now the results have been rather lackluster. Now we're hearing all this Harden, potentially being traded chatter. So, yeah, I think there could be some pressure there with not only how much they invested to clear the cap space to acquire Durant and Irving initially, but also all the depth that they sacrificed to get James Harden in the door as well. So I wouldn't be shocked if there was a lot of pressure at the top of the Brooklyn organization.
What are your thoughts on the other two teams? The conversations about Atlanta and Minnesota. We know obviously in Minnesota, they have new ownership coming in. The new ownership claims they're going to change the culture and we're going to be a winning organization. And then in Atlanta, they were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and now they're barely getting into the play-in tournament. The season ended.
Atlanta could be a team that maybe is a little bit in panic mode. Like you said, they had that phenomenal run in the postseason last year and could be trying to recreate that again this year and could see Ben Simmons as an avenue to upgrading themselves and enable to consolidate some assets and have a set rotation, everyone have set roles and be prepared for that postseason push. And then on the Minnesota side, they could see it as, maybe they've outdone their expectations so far this year. Karl Anthony Towns is an all-star. Anthony Edwards still very solid in his second year. They have a lot of young pieces around that core as well. So that, like from the beginning, they could see Ben Simmons as that final piece to take them from, a pretty good team in the West to a team that could really flirt with a deep postseason run, with the Lakers, being not what we thought heading into what some thought heading into the year. The Clippers are injured. Yeah, you still have to deal with Phoenix and Golden State, but they may feel that the West is more open now than it might be next season or moving forward.
I've run into a lot of people in the last 24 hours, Kevin, that have been screaming, don't trade Tyrese Maxey. And while I agree with that, I would also say that there's a lot of ways to make a deal happen without trading him anyway. He's not the only tradable player on this roster. I mentioned Danny Green's expiring contract. Obviously, Thibault, he's kind of a boomer bust guy at this point. There are other players. I mean, there's even suggested they could trade Seth Curry. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I think at least my message, you tell me if I'm right or not, is look, I wouldn't trade Maxey, but no one says they have to trade him anyway to get a deal done.
Yeah, I think there's ways to get a deal done without trading Tyrese Maxey. In terms of if or should they trade him, the only thing I'll say is this. With a guy like Daryl Morey running the show, there is only one player on the Sixers roster that's untouchable, and that's Joel Embiid. Everyone else, in reality, in theory, is expendable. That being said, I would say Tyrese Maxey is the closest thing the Sixers have to an untouchable asset outside of Joel Embiid, just because of what he's been able to do, the potential he's shown. And I know people, are looking at this season as a whole. When you're looking at the whole championship window, seeing what Tyrese Maxey is now at 21, there should be a lot of hype and excitement to the player he could be at 23, at 24. And the production you're getting from a guy on his rookie scale contract is extremely valuable for a franchise that has a lot of money tied up right now at the top of its roster. So with all that being said, with the potential, with the business side of things, the contract side of things, I would say Tyrese Maxey is near untouchable, but not fully untouchable.
And finally, before I let you go, Kevin, the one guy we haven't talked about, Tobias Harris. I'll leave it open for you.
So I've always been someone that's favored Tobias Harris. I would say I've defended him a lot just because I think he's still a very sound player. I think he's playing a little bit out of his role. I think he's best suited as the third best player on the team. And while a lot of people are zeroing in on the season, granted, because his season has been up and down, there's no denying that whatsoever. I can fully admit that. But if the Sixers are able to make a trade for someone who is a true second option on a very good team and can be that buffer between Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris, I think the hatred or the slander towards Tobias Harris goes away, and I think he can settle in much comfortably into that third option, because I think that's where he's truly best suited at his apex. That is what he's meant to be. He's a very good player, but he's one of those jack of all trades, master of none on the floor. He does a lot of things well, but nothing great. And I think you can't really have someone like that as your second option, because those type of players need something they can go to get a basket when needed late in the game. And I just don't think that's Tobias Harris. Not knocking him. He's still a very good player, but that's just not him, using him to the fullest. So I'm not fully on the trade Tobias Harris wave. I know a lot of people want him to do something in like a salary dumping move. I think that would be a horrible trade. But if they're able to come away with someone who can, fully form a big three to where Joel is your clear alpha, you have the Robin to his Batman, and then you have Tobias Harris, who is that solidified third piece. I think that's a very formidable trio. I think that would be a very good trio that could be a contender in the Eastern Conference.
He is Kevin McCormick. You can follow him on Twitter at Kevin MCC NBA, Sixers beat writer for Clutch Points, and he joined us right here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers back in action tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. versus the Bulls, and the NBA trade deadline is just days away. Kevin, I appreciate you jumping on today and the insights.
Absolutely, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Josh Hennig hanging in with you in the Matt Black Kia Studios here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll check in with you guys have to say on the other side. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. That's 609-403-0973. Also, you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Download it for free, and it's thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. Foul segment next.
It's Sixers basketball tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Sixers ball back to the end of the lane. Left hand layup. It's good. Tyrese Maxey. Oh, yeah.
The Sixers are in Chicago to face the Bulls. Coverage begins at 3:30. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN.
Take a break from the books and plan your spring break getaway now. Create memories to last a lifetime, starting with nonstop flights from Atlantic City International Airport to Cancun, San Juan, and Miami. Book your low-cost flight today by visiting spirit.com.
Jackson Hewitt needs you to know 3 things about filing taxes this year. 1, there are thousands of dollars worth of new tax credits on the table. 2, you have to file for them to make sure you get the right amount. 3, a Jackson Hewitt Tax Pro will help track down every credit you deserve. Tax credits for being a parent, taking care of a parent, going to school, and so much more. You don't want to miss out on thousands. Jackson Hewitt knows that. Discover thousands in tax credits and get your biggest refund guaranteed. Learn more at jacksonhewitt.com.
As a local bank with deep roots in Cape May County, Crest Savings Bank's directors, management, and employees are all part of your community. We are your neighbors, friends, and family. Our financial centers serve your personal and professional deposit, loan, and wealth management needs. We are thankful for the opportunity to serve our residents and visitors for over 100 years by providing small-town customer service with modern products. Crest Savings Bank. Banking is what we do. Community is who we are. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, Ray Magliozzi here. I'd like to carry more parts at my shop, but I just don't have the room. Every time I go in the back to get wiper blades, I trip over a dusty crate of Honda air filters, then bang my head on some GTO radiator hoses. eBay Motors never has that problem. They stock all the right parts at the right prices. 122 million of them, with everything from new headlights to vintage gear shifters. I can't imagine being able to stock 122 million parts. I mean, where would I get all those shelves? eBay Motors. Let's ride.
Football fans, the weekend you've waited for is finally here. Put your game face on to make sure your game day picks are perfect with the best wings, ears, and tails in South Jersey. All from the Piccalilli Inn on Route 206 in Chemung. For generations, the Piccalilli has been #1 for the big game. Try any of their homestyle favorites and find out why. Visit them on Facebook or at Piccalilli.com for their Pick Picks Big Game Specials. And be sure to pre-order to guarantee your spot in Sunday's lineup.
The Piccalilli Inn. It's Tango Day, everybody. Follow after me and step and back and slide and dip. That's tango.
Why is Ice-T leading our tango class?
It's probably the heart-shaped Honey Nut Cheerios. He found out they can help lower cholesterol. Now he's having fun taking care of his heart in all sorts of new ways.
Let's see those hips move, people.
Hurry and get your heart-shaped Cheerios. They're only here for a limited time.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $700 on average, and those savings add up. Imagine what you could buy in the future.
So I used the savings from switching to Progressive 30 years ago to buy tickets to the championship game. You know, between those two teams that didn't exist 30 years ago. Yeah, I'm a big Alaska Palm Trees fan. Which is a team now in the future.
So switch to Progressive and save big, because those savings can add up in the future. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive in 2020. Potential savings will vary.
Tired of sitting in traffic? If you won the $137 million Powerball jackpot, you could take your private jet anywhere. After all, anything can happen in Jersey.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Final segment of the show, Josh Hennig hanging out with you. 97.3 ESPN. Today on 97.3 ESPN, we have a college basketball doubleheader coming up. 3:30 p.m. coverage begins of Baylor versus Kansas. And then following that will be one of the biggest rivalries of all college basketball, Duke versus North Carolina. And then tonight, after Duke versus North Carolina, we will get you to the Knicks versus the Lakers. So 3 straight basketball games. Keep it tuned right here to 97.3 ESPN FM. Tomorrow, Billy Schweim in the locker room from 10 a.m. to noon. Sixers basketball at 3:30 p.m. That's your Sunday slate here on 97.3 ESPN FM. And then Mike Gill will be back on Monday for the Sports Bash at 2 p.m. And I'll be on game night at 6 p.m. on Monday on 97.3 ESPN FM. As promised, we'll get to your thoughts and comments now at 609-403-0973 is the text board. You also can DM the show. Priority messaging thanks to the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. Adam in EHT chimes in and says, hypothetically, if the Sixers get Harden, where do they rank? Harden is on the decline. He's worn down big time. Couple things, Adam. One, I think that the thing with Harden is I think he's physically and mentally tired of carrying teams. I think that he's worn down because I think he's mentally fatigued. I think he's a guy who I don't think Harden ever long-term wanted to be the number one guy. I think he enjoyed it for a while, but then he realized that these coaches are depending on him more than he really wants to. I think that Harden is just tired. I don't blame him for being worn down. Listen, you work a lot of hours during the week and you have a stressful week of work and you get burned out, right? And I think Harden's in the same boat. I think that Harden is a guy who realizes that, he can only do so much at this point. So to me, I think that, Harden can still be an extremely productive player. Hypothetically, where if the Sixers get Harden, where do they place? I still have Milwaukee 1, Miami Heat 2. I think the Sixers will be 3rd. Potentially. Now, it depends what the Nets get. In my hypothetical scenario, there's 2 scenarios that could happen here to me. One is a Ben Simmons Harden where Simmons goes to Brooklyn. If Simmons goes to Brooklyn, I think Brooklyn still has problems, okay? I don't think that's the ideal situation for the Nets. I think if Harden's in Philadelphia and Simmons is in Brooklyn, then I'm saying Sixers 3, Brooklyn 4. But if my other scenario I talked about, where if you run the numbers and you see that there is a scenario where Simmons lands in either Atlanta or Minnesota, and then the Nets get John Collins, Bogdanovich, and Malik Beasley in this in a larger trade, then there's a possibility that the Nets are still better than the Sixers on paper, because I think part of the problem for the Nets is they got 3 superstars and then not much else. They've been leaning on guys like David Duke Jr. and and DeAndre Bembry and who's the other guy? Nick Claxton. Joe Harris has missed most of the year. And it just feels like that the Nets, they're playing on borrowed time. You know what I mean? They're a team that's kind of running out of options. And if you can get some bona fide role players at a higher caliber, you bring in a John Collins, for example, you bring in a Bogdanovich and or a Malik Beasley. Now your lineup is looking a lot more competitive with the best teams in the East outside of the couple superstars you got. And if Kyrie is going to keep having this part-time playing role, and you're going to ask someone like Patty Mills to keep playing that point guard position in the home game situations, Durant's going to need somebody else on the floor with him who's not James Harden. And whether it is a John Collins or a Bogdanovich or a Beasley, those guys make a lot more sense in a 7-game series going against the likes of Milwaukee and Chicago and Miami and Philadelphia. So to me, I think the way that everyone wins in this situation, Adam, is hypothetically, if the Sixers do get Harden, they could be the third best team in the East, or they could be fourth, depending on what the Nets walk away with if Harden is traded. I still think Milwaukee and Miami are the two best. Now, I'm not saying they're invincible. I'm not saying they can't be beaten, but I do legitimately think that people are underrating Miami's veterans and their team and their leadership. And then when it comes to the situation with the Bulls, I understand where McCormick's coming from. But Kevin's bigger point is the Bulls don't have the playoff and the veteran experience on their roster. I understand that, but I don't think you can dismiss DeMar DeRozan's leadership. I don't think you can dismiss Billy Donovan's experience coaching in this league at this point. I think the Bulls are still very dangerous. When they're healthy, when it's Lonzo Ball and Zach LaVine and DeRozan and Vucevic and all those guys together, this is a very formidable team. They're a very dangerous team. And I think that you're finding out with guys who have been injured, the play of guys like DeSumo and Jones and White, that this team is not without depth. And I think that when they get everyone back, including Caruso and everybody else, the full strength, I think they're going to be dangerous for a lot of these teams. And if Brooklyn doesn't play their cards right, they can lose to a Bulls in a 7-game series because Chicago doesn't play great defense, but they play good enough defense to win in the NBA. You know, I said earlier that I think the Heat are dangerous because they can play defense and they have veterans. The team that I don't have a lot of confidence in, honestly, is the Cavs. I think the Cavs are a paper tiger right now. I think the Cavs are taking advantage of some opportunistic matchup situations. I think that the losses of Rubio and Sexton are going to hurt them long term. I mean, they still might make the playoffs. I'm not saying they won't make the postseason, but I do think that when you look at the teams who are the 7 through 10, Atlanta is one trade away from being a straight threat. Okay. I think Atlanta is a massive threat right now if they can figure things out. You know, they still have Trae Young. So, you know, I can never dismiss a team with a superstar like that. I think the Celtics, they can make a trade and really ramp up, you know, the balance of their team because they still have Tatum, they still have Brown, they still have Marcus Smart. They got a ton of talent over there in Boston. It's young and inexperienced talent around those guys, though. So, you know, outside of Horford and Cantor Freedom, they don't have a ton of dudes. So, I love Charlotte. I love watching them. I think they're so much fun. But I don't know how much better or not they are than Cleveland, right? Cleveland plays better defense than Charlotte. Charlotte's a more explosive offensive team. So, you know, if they were to play in a 7-game series, I guess Charlotte wins. I don't know 100% sure. So the answer, Adam and EHT's question, I think the Sixers with Harden hypothetically would be the third best team, depending on who the Nets get in that kind of trade. Josh Hennig hanging out with you in the Matt Black Kia studios here on 97.3 ESPN. A Saturday tradition unlike any other. I always give you guys a couple picks for the weekend. Here are the picks I'm rocking with right now. First of all, I like the under in the Knicks-Lakers game tonight. It's 212.5 is the over-under. I like the under in that game. I think both teams are not going to have a ton of scoring in this game. I'm sorry, the over. I like the over in the game because I think both teams can't play defense. Man, goodness, I can't remember my notes. This is what happens. You work too many days. See, I'm like James Harden. I'm burned out. I'm tired. I've had too many days in a row. You know, I'm just kidding. I'm not James Harden. James Harden makes a lot more money. But I like the over in the Knicks-Lakers game a lot. Both those teams don't play very good defense. I can see that being a crazy high-scoring game. On the UFC slate, we have some UFC action this weekend. I do like outright Jack Hermanson to beat Sean Strickland. I think Strickland has taken advantage of some bad matchups and people who weren't prepared to deal with him. So I think that's why I'm going with that. And then looking for a little parlay action. Hakeem Dawodu to win combined with Alexis Davis. That is a parlay, is a plus 126. So a couple picks for you for the weekend in sports. I am Josh Hennig at Josh Hennig on Twitter. I'll catch you on Monday night on game night at 6 p.m. following Sports Bash with Mike Gill here on 97.3 ESPN. Enjoy your weekend, everybody.